What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be covering my Pulverized Druid build here in Hardcore, the S-tier Pulverized Druid build, if you can believe it. And before we get started, I did want to go ahead and give a massive shout out to the entire Druid community. We have been working tirelessly season after season, begging for a great patch for the Druid, and Season 9 has finally brought a lot of great changes for the class, and man, you can already tell because this build is absolutely a blast to play, and I am so excited to try so many more. But today we're going to be talking about Pulverize. And I also want to give another big shout out to a Softcore Druid player, and I'm sorry, brother, I'm not exactly sure what your name is, but I'm going to post a link to his Pit Tier 106 clear already. Pit Tier 106 with the Pulverized Druid in Season 9, and I know this guy has been working tirelessly season after season, so I'm going to post his 106 pit clear down in the description of the video if you're interested. And I've seen people pretty much wait till this guy posts up his builds inside of the unofficial leaderboards and rip those builds straight away. So I just wanted to give credit where credit is due. This man has set the tone for the Softcore Druid season after season. So thank you, brother. You've been doing a great job, and I hope you have a great Season 9. Now, with all that being said, as you can see, guys, we're doing things a little bit differently here. Typically, we make these videos in Mobalytics, but we're going to be making them in-game to show you guys my gear, give you guys a brief explanation. But as always, a link to all of my builds will be down in the description of the video, as well as a link to the leveling and mid-game version of this build, and the in-game planner, which I will be updating and probably make a second video as I get into the high-end gear pieces with this build. So as you guys can see, this is a very easy build to set up. All you really need is the Rotting Lightbringer to make this build take off like a rocket. And I've been playing solo self out in Hardcore all season so far, and I've had some pretty terrible luck. All of the gameplay footage you're going to see, the Pit Tier 80 clear, all of the Tier 4 bosses I've been killing, that was being done with a 750 weapon. Now, I did recently just get a little bit lucky and had a GA Rotting Lightbringer drop to Willpower, but I have not made any content with that yet. And this has been my primary setup for Tier 4. So let's go ahead and go over it. So on the helmet, we're going to be using Undying. Now, it is okay to swap this out to Vasili's Prayer, and that works really well with this build. However, I've really been liking the added tankiness I get from the Undying, as well as the resistance to all elements, which is a little bit harder to cap out this season. So because I want that extra resistances, I've just been running a basic helm with Undying. Then on the chest piece, we're going Insatiable Fury, the tried and true Insatiable Fury, and this is a great damage increase to our build, plus that nice +2 Iron Fur has been a massive help in keeping me alive in Tier 4 content this season. And even though HP no longer scales overpower, you will see a decent amount of HP on my build because survivability is still important, guys. And even if you can deal a ton of damage, if you're dying all the time in Softcore, you're not really dealing damage when you're dead. So it is important to still stack out some HP on your build, and you'll see that in my setup because obviously I can't afford to die in Hardcore. Then on the gloves, we're going to be running Changeling's Debt. Now, I have been playing around with Shockwave versus having like just a straight damage multiplier, and so far I have enjoyed just having a straight damage multiplier. Now, as I start to get into the mythic items, the Shroud of False Death, the Air of Perdition Helm, I might end up swapping over to Shockwave, and in my build planner, you'll see that Shockwave is the primary aspect. However, I am liking testing those two out just to see which one ends up being a little bit better. And as you can see on the gloves, we have a Willpower, Max Life GA, and some added attack speed. And you will need to add some attack speed to your build for any setup with the Pulverized Druid this season because attack speed is very important to up your damage output. Then onto the pants, this is where we're slotting in our Ursine Horror. Now, when we do get a Tybalt's Will, we will swap those down to the boots. But for right now, we're running a plain pair of pants because we need that Shroud of False Death to really up our overall resistances with that big roll of all stats to our intelligence. And so we're going to be running a plain pair of pants with the Ursine Horror for right now until we get lucky and get a mythic drop that we need. And you see we got some more Willpower, Max Life, resistance to all elements, total armor, and pulverized size. Then on our boots, we're just running a ballistic aspect to get 2 more ranks to our pulverized. No big deal here. We're pretty much going to stick it out with these stats: willpower, max life, resistance to all elements, movement speed, and pulverized size. I may flex one of these stats, possibly the max life, for an armor roll if I need it in the in-game, but I still have to give those mythics to see where I end up with all of my stats. Then for our weapon, it's obviously the Rotting Lightbringer, the superstar of the season for the Druid, and this thing is absolutely a monster. All of the changes they made after the PTR have been absolutely insane. All of the affixes, the +% to willpower, the poison damage, the chance for Pulverize to hit twice, and the massive resource cost reduction on top of the seasonal mechanic has made building into a Pulverize build super easy. And honestly, it doesn't even feel overpowered when compared to the meta. It's doing quite well, and I hope they do not nerf it. It gives us this great passive that gives us a massive multiplier to our overpowers and guarantees our overpowers when we are overpowering into a poison puddle, and we are always going to be overpowering into a poison puddle with this weapon. And as you guys can see on the screen, the best way to play this build is to be very active. You don't want to stand in one place and just pulverize the ground, pulverize the ground. What you want to do is move around your enemies, move around the mobs, move around the boss, make multiple puddles that are very close together, and then when you pulverize those puddles, you do a massive amount of damage to multiple targets or single targets. This build excels at both. It has a ton of AoE and a ton of single target damage. So this is a massive change to the Druid, a wonderful, unique item, and I hope that the devs use this as an example of how to build badass uniques for a class, because this thing really is a ton of fun to play around with. And I could not imagine getting a multiple GA drop on a Rotting Lightbringer with a really great passive. It would absolutely make my season. So if you are looking for a super fun Druid build, you got to play Pulverize this season. Then on our Amulet, you see here, we have a terrible Amulet. We have a good GA to willpower, but the rest of the affixes are pretty trash. Critical strike chance, total armor, we do not need that. Werebear is the king of armor. We have a ton on our Paragon board, and the new 5 for 5 bonus we get from Grizzly Rage gives us a massive percentage increase to our armor. So we obviously need a big upgrade to our Amulet, but just you guys seeing this just shows you that you can clear tier 4 content really easily with a decent setup. You don't have to have perfect gear, and my gameplay shows it because I'm doing it in hardcore. Then on our first ring, we're going to be running our retaliation aspect, willpower, max life, resistance to all elements, and I will probably keep a ring with resistance to all elements even when I get my mythics. I'm just, again, needing to see exactly what happens when we stack out all stats instead of having that massive HP roll on our Shroud of False Death. Then on our second ring, we're going to be running the Rampaging Werebeast to increase the duration of our Grizzly Rage, as well as give us that massive crit damage multiplier. And then we have Willpower, Max Life, Critical Strike Chance. We'll probably switch this out to a Ring of Starless Skies when we get one. Now, I did want to go ahead and say that resource generation, you'll see here on my temp rings, isn't necessary once you start getting those high-end gear pieces. And I probably will swap out some of my seasonal mechanic powers just to increase my damage, because we have this massive amount of resource cost reduction on our weapon, and a Ring of Starless Skies is going to further give us a massive amount of resource cost reduction after we stack up the buff from casting our core skill. And we really won't need that much resource generation, not to mention that even the Shroud of False Death gives us a ton of resource generation. So this build is absolutely cracked for Season 9, and as you can see in the gameplay footage, doing tons of damage with really, I would say, below average gear pieces when you see most build videos. Now for our first reward, we're going to be running NikoWrex, and I really love Neo because it's super easy to build up that offering to get that Quas to activate to give us that double damage Pulverize. And another way you could run this is NikoWrex. When you have companions with you, you get that massive amount of offering to overflow the Quas runeword, but Neo gives you more Quas activations overall, while Nagu will give you a higher damage version of Quas. So it's really your choice. I personally like more Quas activations, but I may play around with both later on in the season. But for right now, we're going NikoWrex. It's actually much easier to build into as well. Then for our second rune word, we're currently running IgniQ for the automatic bulwark, which helps us activate the Neo version of our NikoWrex rune word. Now, if you do not have Igni, it's perfectly fine to use Sir. It is the blue rune word that gives you 300 resource after activating a skill 5 times and then goes on cooldown. It will still activate your bulwark pretty consistently, but the best version would be something like Tam or Igni with Q to get more bulwark activations to keep that thing up as much as possible, increase your survivability, and obviously it activates your Quas rune with Neo that much easier because you won't be taking damage, because when you get hit with a Hive of Barrier, it doesn't count as taking damage. Now moving on to our Horadric spells, I've been using the Astral Pillar. Now another great option is the Disintegrate Beam. I personally really like this pillar so far. It gives us a nice taunt towards the enemies, which gives us an indirect damage reduction, and it also clusters all of the enemies around our Astral Pillar, which is actually nice. And then we get the vulnerable to taunted enemies. Now because this does not work on bosses, I do have the Sapping Crux to give us vulnerability, and that is why I will probably end up eventually swapping to the Disintegrate Beam. But for right now, we're running the pillar with Sapping Crux. I also have Reactive Ooze to give us that maximum resource generation, and that's why you can see my gameplay footage, despite the fact that we're running the Quas rune to get the double damage on our Pulverize, our resources are just filling right back up. This is absolutely insane, and it's super easy to get a hold of early game. Gives you that big 20% max resource generation, and I'm going to tell you what, it feels like more than 20%. It's crazy. And then we're also going to be running Shifting Powder. Now this is because I love movement speed, and this is a super easy way to access dang near movement speed cap, so 70%. And I absolutely love this, and I probably will keep this in my in-game setup, even though I might change the Reactive Ooze because I will have enough resource generation from my gear pieces. Now moving back to our gear real quick, I want to go over the jewels. So I've been testing the gem that gives our catalytic seal some cooldown. Now I'm not really sure if it's actually working as it's intended, so I'll probably change this gem out. But that's what we're running right now. But you'll see in the planner on Mobalytics, that's not what I have there because again, I'm just testing this out. I'll probably change it out myself. Then for our second ring, we're running the primary core stat and max life increase. Now, something that's very interesting about this gem is that when the guardians spawn inside of the pit, it actually counts towards your pit bar filling up when you kill them. So it has the added benefit of giving us that extra pit clear time to focus on the boss. And I think that's actually a pretty little interesting mechanic. Now, when they do spawn at whatever pit tier you're at, so it still takes some time to kill them, but I thought that was a pretty interesting little find when I was clearing my pit tiers. And then for our third gem, we're running the gem that gives us a little more movement speed and crit chance. Now, again, this will change, but because of the gear I currently have and not having any mythics, I get more benefit out of having the crit chance and movement speed versus a straight damage multiplier. Now, I am a little bit hesitant to run the gem that gives us the 20% multiplier with a 10% damage increase towards ourselves. But if I manage to get all of my damage reduction under control, I will probably end up running that as I push into pit tiers. So be on the lookout for that. Like I said, I will make an update video if I do change some things out. But for right now, we're just going with the crit chance movement speed because we get better damage out of that with our current gear setup. Now into our spirit boons. As you can see, we're running Gift of the Stag to get that 10 spirit per second. Then we're going to be grabbing up Iron Feather for the max life, as I am in hardcore and I love max life, as well as the Avian Wrath for the crit damage multiplier. Now, if you're playing on softcore and you would like to run something different, I would go ahead and remove the Iron Feather for something like swooping attacks if you need to reach max attack speed cap, or grabbing up Scythe Talons for the critical strike chance as well as the lucky hit chance. You definitely can't go wrong with that. But for me, hardcore, Iron Feather, max life, still super valuable. Then for the wolf, we're going with the Calamity boon just to extend the duration of our Grizzly Rage. And then for the snake, we're going with Masochistic to give us a little bit more survivability. Now you can obviously go with Overload or you can go with Obsidian Slam. It's really up to you. We really don't have a great spirit boon for the snake, so I'm just going with Masochistic for right now. Now onto our skill tree, we're going to be running Claw and Maul on our basic skills, and that's just a swap back and forth really fast before we cast Grizzly Rage to get our quick shift buffs. Now the cool thing is if you forget to do this, your Bulwark Runeword will actually automatically swap you when it goes off, causing you to build these stacks without actually needing to build them before you shift into Grizzly Rage. And something else you can keep in mind, guys, is that if you forget to activate your buffs before you swap into Grizzly Rage, you can also emote with your character, which will swap you back into human form for a second to build up your quick shift buffs. But honestly, it's not really that big of a deal if you just continue to play through and activate your Bulwark. But for right now, we're running the Claw Maul because we always buff up before we go into Grizzly Rage. Then onto our core skill tree, we're going 1 point Heart of the Wild into 3 points Wild Impulse, obviously for the damage multiplier. Then we're stacking out Pulverize, going into Raging Pulverize because it gives us that big multiplier as well as that guaranteed overpower. And then we're picking up all the points in Iron Fur for the added survivability. Then we're going 1 point Cyclone Armor, again, added survivability there. 3 points Backlash for the multiplier when we activate our debilitating Roar. And then 3 points Ancestral Fortitude, which I might end up moving around, but for right now, because we don't have Shroud, we're going with the added resistances. Then we're going 1 point Debilitating Roar. It says 5 because of our Insatiable Fury, but 1 point here. And then we're going into the Innate Debilitating Roar for the added multiplier. For our companions, like I said, I'm not running Nagu runes, so we're not going companions, but if you do, obviously you'll find points for that here. But I am going to be picking up the 3 points in Feral Aptitude. Then for our Wrath tree, we're going 3 points Mending for the added HP. Like I said, I still want HP on my Hardcore Druid. And you can pick up 3 points in Provocation. I haven't really noticed a big difference when I do have it, but I might play around with it a little bit more in the end game when I take those points out of Ancestral Fortitude. Then we're going 3 points Crushing Earth, 3 points Stone Guard, and 1 point into Safeguard just to build Fortify that much easier. Then we're grabbing 1 point Neurotoxin, 3 points into the brand new Toxic Claws, which gives us a multiplier to poison damage. And because we're running the Rabid Bear aspect, we're getting a lot of damage out of this. And then we're going 3 points into Envenom with the big 30% multiplicative damage increase to our critical strike damage. And then for our ultimate tree, we're going 3 points Defiance, 3 points Natural Disaster, 1 point Resonance, and 1 point Circle of Life. Then 3 points Defensive Posture for added damage reduction while we're fortified. Obviously, if you play in Softcore, you can play around with your damage reduction a little bit. I like to have a decent amount of it. Then 5 points Grizzly Rage, which gives us that nice added bonus of having 30% more armor while Grizzly Rage is active, and it's always active. And then obviously we're going to be going through the passives and picking up Supreme Grizzly Rage. But really, you could save a point here if you wanted to and just go Prime Grizzly Rage, as that's what's giving us the Unstoppable. So you don't necessarily need to pick this up, and I could probably not pick this up, or at least not pick up Safeguard because we're going to have a ton of Fortify already. But it's just there for right now. Then we're going 3 points Quick Shift and 3 points Heightened Senses. And then we're moving into the Earth Sign Strength key passive. And again, guys, that max life is still really beneficial, especially if you play hardcore like me. Now, something I did want to mention before moving on to the Paragon board is the changes to Grizzly Rage that no one knew about until we actually got to try it out. So Grizzly Rage now actually starts cooling down while you're inside of the ultimate and can then be refreshed while you're inside of your ultimate. However, it does have a little funny mechanic, which I actually think is pretty interesting and probably should stay. So if you pop into Grizzly Rage and cool it down within the time required by either killing enemies or overpowering bosses, or even just stacking out Grizzly Rage cooldown reduction, you can then refresh the buff, as I previously said, while you're in Grizzly Rage. However, if you allow your Grizzly Rage to fall off completely, even when the skill is off cooldown while in Grizzly Rage, it will then go on an automatic cooldown, and you'll have to wait the entire duration of the cooldown before you can reactivate Grizzly Rage. And I actually think this is kind of cool because it gives you a really strong bonus to playing well and being an active user of your skills, but gives you that downside that if you're not paying attention and if you're not playing well enough and you haven't built your build well enough, if you let that Grizzly Rage fall off, you will lose pretty much almost all of your damage if you let the timer run out without refreshing your Grizzly Rage. So a big thank you to the devs. You guys did an awesome job. We've been asking for this forever since they pretty much took away the automatic cooldown while you were in Grizzly Rage form. And I think this is a very cool change and a way to reward good play with your Pulverized Druid and also punish those players who are being a little bit lazy. So this is really cool, and I hope it stays the way it is because it is awesome and I absolutely love it. Now moving on to our Paragon board, as you guys can see here, we are at Paragon level 200. And I have several glyphs leveled up that I'm not actually using, and that is because I'm going to be testing all of them to see which one I like the most. But for right now, we have Bane, we have Dominate, we do have Earth and Sky leveled up. We're using Fang and Claw. We also have Headhunter leveled up, which I think will be the better glyph for one of these slots as I approach the end game, because we have that massive willpower percent on our weapon, and this gives us willpower, so it's going to be amplified by that. Then we're running Keeper as well as Spirit. So on our first board, that's where we're going to be slotting in our Dominate glyph. This might be swapped out for something else like Headhunter or Earth and Sky, but for right now we're running Dominate. I feel like I'm getting more out of that right now currently with this setup than I am the other two options. Then on our second board, that's going to be Earth and Devastation. Obviously, we always pick up this node for the multiplier, and it's super easy to build out the crowd control bonus here because we can slot in something like Fang and Claw, Keeper, or Earth and Sky, which gives us a big bonus to our magic or rare nodes. And we're slotting in our Fang and Claw here. Then for our third board, that's going to be the Survival Instincts board, and we're slotting in the Keeper glyph here because I like the added bonus to our HP rare node. Then our third board is going to be none other than the Height and Malice board for that big multiplier. And then we're also slotting in the Spirit glyph here for the critical strike damage as well as the damage multiplier we get towards our critical strike damage as well as enemies that we've critically striked multiple times. And then last but not least, we're going with the Ancestral Guidance board, and we're slotting in our Bane glyph here. Now, the reason why we're using Bane this season is because the Rabid Bear aspect turns our pulverized damage into poison damage. This gives us additive poison damage. This also multiplies out our poison damage with the legendary bonus. And not just that, but it has this additional bonus of giving our poisoning damage a 15% chance to double the amount of damage it deals over their duration. So you can see that when we have those poison puddles out that amplify our damage significantly, when we proc our Bane here, it's going to just juice up that damage even more and make the splash damage as well as the damage over time of those puddles insane. And it's going to absolutely destroy bosses and destroy enemy packs that you run into, whether it be in pits, Infernal Horde, any tier 4 content, deleted almost straight away, especially when you start getting those high-end gear pieces. Then last but not least, for our mercenary, we are going to be running right here because he gives us this nice bonus to our resistances. And then we're grabbing up Bastion and then moving into the inspiration passive that gives us that nice multiplicative damage while we're sitting inside of Bastion, as well as the fact that Bastion just makes us invulnerable anyway. Like when you're standing in the bubble, you just can't be killed. So that's really nice, especially when you're getting into that high tier content and you might need that nice chance to recover from taking a good amount of damage, or just to stand there and pulverize mindlessly without worrying about dying. And then for our reinforcement mercenary, we're going with Subo. Now this will change. I'm just currently leveling Subo. This can be pretty much whatever you guys want, but I'm leveling Subo right now, so we're just having Molotov here and we're tying it to Pulverize. But that's really it for the video, guys. Like I said, I will be making a follow-up video to this build when I get those high-end gear pieces, and I will keep you guys updated as I clear pit tier after pit tier. I'll probably do the tier 100 pit clear and then post that to the unofficial leaderboards. That way you guys can see that, as well as to my YouTube channel. And if you are interested in any of my builds this season, they are going to be down in the description of this video, a link to all of my builds, as well as a link to the leveling and mid-game version of this build and the in-game version of this build, so you guys will have that. And also a link to the highest softcore clear will be down in the description of this video as well. So don't forget to go and look at that video, look at that build planner, leave a comment on that guy's video, and give him a like. That man works tirelessly season after season and makes the absolute best softcore druid builds every single season that I've seen so far. So with that being said, I will be moving on from this build at some point in time in the near future so I can cover more builds for you guys. I have so many builds set up with a Shred build, Wolves build. I might even make a Stormclaw build, even though my boy Screamheart is always cranking out the best Stormclaw builds season after season. There's Landslide. There's just so many things to try out with the Druid. And I will also be making a Softcore Druid and testing out Lightning Storm and possibly making a Lightning Storm build in the near future as well. But as always, guys, if you have any questions whatsoever regarding any of my builds this season, go ahead and post them down in the comment section of this video, and I will answer them as soon as I see them. Or if you see that I'm live, feel free to stop by and go ahead and post them out in the chat, and you will get your answer sooner rather than later. But for now, guys, happy 4th of July, and as always, I hope you guys are having a great day or a great night, depending on wherever you're from, and peace out, guys. I'm about to go crush some pits. See ya.